The fluorescent lights of the hospital cafeteria buzzed overhead like dying insects, casting a sickly yellow glow over everything they touched. I stood behind the counter, my hands submerged in lukewarm dishwater that smelled faintly of bleach and yesterday's meatloaf. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. 13 more minutes until my shift ended. 13 more minutes until I could peel off these grease-stained scrubs and drag myself back to the studio apartment I could barely afford. My fingers were wrinkled and raw, the skin around my cuticles cracked from the constant exposure to harsh detergent. I'd stopped wearing my mother's ring weeks ago. The silver had started turning my finger green, and I couldn't risk losing it down the drain. Not when it was the only thing I had left of her. "Emma, table 6 needs clearing," Denise called from the register, not bothering to look up from her phone. She never did. In the 6 months I'd worked here, I'd become part of the furniture, invisible, unremarkable, just another pair of hands to do the work no one else wanted. I dried my hands on my apron and grabbed the gray plastic bin, weaving between tables scattered with the remnants of late-night meals. The cafeteria was nearly empty at this hour, just a handful of exhausted residents and one elderly man who came every night to sit alone with his coffee, staring at nothing. Table 6 was in the far corner, tucked away near the emergency exit. Someone had left their tray, half-eaten pasta congealing in cream sauce, a untouched bread roll, a coffee cup with lipstick stains around the rim. I reached for the tray, my mind already drifting to whether I had enough change for the bus, or if I'd have to walk home again. That's when I smelled it. Not the antiseptic sharpness that permeated every corner of St. Catherine's Hospital. Not the competing odors of cafeteria food and cleaning supplies. This was different. Expensive. A cologne that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Something dark and woody with undertones of bergamot and leather, the kind of scent that belonged in boardrooms and private clubs, not a hospital cafeteria at midnight. I turned, the tray still in my hands, and found myself looking directly at a man's chest. A very well-dressed chest, clad in a charcoal suit that fit like it had been sewn onto his body by someone who understood exactly how fabric should drape over muscle and bone. My gaze traveled upward. Crisp white shirt, no tie, the top 2 buttons undone in a way that seemed both careless and calculated. A jaw that could have been carved from marble. Lips that quirked slightly at one corner, as if he found something amusing about my obvious scrutiny. And then his eyes. Dark. Nearly black in the harsh cafeteria lighting, framed by lashes that were almost obscenely thick for a man. Those eyes were studying me with an intensity that made my breath catch in my throat, like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve. He was young, late 20s, maybe 30, with the kind of devastating good looks that didn't seem quite real, the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers or movie screens, not standing in front of me while I clutched a tray of dirty dishes like a shield. "I'm sorry," I stammered, taking a step back and nearly tripping over my own feet. The tray wobbled dangerously. "I didn't see you there. Did you need something? The kitchen's about to close, but I can probably—" "You're bleeding." His voice was low, quiet, but it cut through my rambling like a blade through silk. Smooth, with an accent I couldn't quite place, something European layered beneath perfect English. I looked down at my hands. Sure enough, a thin line of blood was welling up from a cut on my index finger. I must have caught it on something sharp in the dishwater. I hadn't even felt it. "Oh, it's nothing really. Just a small cut. Happens all the time." I set the tray down on the nearest table, fumbling for the napkins dispenser. My hands were shaking, though I couldn't have said why. There was something about the way he was looking at me, not with pity or concern, but with something far more unsettling. Recognition, maybe, or possession. Before I could grab a napkin, he moved. Not rushed, not aggressive, but with a fluid grace that suggested every action was deliberate, controlled. He caught my wrist in his hand, his fingers warm against my cold skin, and examined the cut with the same intense focus he'd directed at my face. "You should be more careful." The words were almost gentle, but there was steel underneath them. A command, not a suggestion. "I'm fine, really. Thank you, but I need to—" The emergency exit door behind us burst open with a bang that made me jump. 3 men entered, moving with purpose, their eyes scanning the room with a professional wariness that made my stomach tighten with instinctive unease. They weren't medical staff. They weren't visitors. They wore dark suits similar to the man still holding my wrist. And there was something about the way they carried themselves, the subtle bulges beneath their jackets, the way their hands never strayed far from their sides, that screamed danger. The man in front of me didn't turn, didn't acknowledge them at all. But I felt the change in him, a coiling tension, like a predator suddenly alert to potential threats in its territory. "Sir," one of them said, his voice low and deferential. "The car's ready. We should go. I'll be there when I'm ready, Marcus." Still, he didn't look at them. His eyes remained fixed on me, on the small cut that had already stopped bleeding. "Tell me your name." It wasn't a request. My mouth went dry. Emma Thorne. Something flickered in those dark eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps. Or victory. "Emma." He said it slowly, tasting each syllable like expensive wine. "You work every night?" "Most nights. Tuesday through Saturday, 6 to midnight." The words tumbled out before I could think better of it, before I could wonder why a man like this, surrounded by bodyguards, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car, would care about my work schedule. He released my wrist finally, but the warmth of his fingers seemed to linger on my skin. From his pocket, he withdrew a handkerchief, actual linen, monogrammed with initials I couldn't quite make out in the dim light, and pressed it gently against my cut. "Keep pressure on it," he instructed, closing my fingers around the soft fabric. "And Emma?" He leaned in slightly, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to smell that intoxicating cologne mixed with something else, something uniquely him. "Be careful walking home alone at night. This neighborhood isn't safe for someone like you." "Someone like me?" I managed to whisper. His lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, unprotected. Before I could process what that meant, he stepped back, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. The 3 men immediately fell into formation around him, 1 in front, 2 behind, creating a protective barrier as they moved toward the exit. I stood there, frozen, the expensive handkerchief pressed against a cut that had probably already stopped bleeding, watching him leave. At the door, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. Our eyes met across the empty cafeteria, and I felt something shift in my chest, like a door opening that I'd never be able to fully close again. Then he was gone, and I was left standing alone with dirty dishes and questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. "Emma, you planning to clear those tables sometime this century?" Denise's sharp voice cut through my stupor. I shook myself, shoving the handkerchief into my pocket and grabbing the tray with hands that still trembled slightly. As I worked through the rest of my shift on autopilot, washing dishes and wiping down tables, I kept catching whiffs of that cologne clinging to my skin, kept feeling the phantom warmth of his fingers around my wrist. It wasn't until I was on the bus home, watching the city lights blur past the grimy window, that I pulled out the handkerchief to examine it more closely. The monogram was elegant, ornate. 2 letters intertwined so artfully it took me a moment to decipher them. DM. I ran my thumb over the embroidered letters, and that's when I felt it. Something small and hard sewn into the corner of the fabric. My heart hammering, I carefully picked at the stitches until a tiny object fell into my palm. A black business card, matte finish, with nothing on it except a phone number embossed in silver. No name, no company. Just those 10 digits gleaming up at me in the dim bus light. I should have thrown it away. Should have left it on the bus seat and never looked back. Instead, I tucked it carefully into my wallet, right next to my mother's photograph, and the $15 that was supposed to last me until next Friday. When I finally stumbled into my apartment at 1 a.m, exhausted down to my bones, I found something that made my blood run cold. Someone had been there. Nothing was missing, nothing disturbed, but I knew. The way my door stuck slightly when it had been closing smoothly that morning. The faint scent of that same cologne lingering in my tiny studio. The sense of violation that prickled along my spine like ice water. On my pillow, pristine against my threadbare sheets, lay a single white rose. Its petals were perfect, untouched by the grime and decay that seemed to coat everything else in my life. Attached to the stem with a thin black ribbon was a note, handwritten in bold, decisive strokes. "You dropped something. I'll be returning it personally. Lock your door, Emma, and keep it locked." My hands shook as I backed away from the bed, my mind racing. I hadn't dropped anything, hadn't lost anything, which meant this was just an excuse. A reason to see me again that he'd manufactured out of thin air. I should have called the police, should have reported the break-in, the implied threat, the way he'd somehow discovered where I lived from a single conversation in a hospital cafeteria, but I didn't. Instead, I picked up the rose with trembling fingers, brought it to my face, and inhaled its perfect, innocent fragrance, while my heart pounded with something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite excitement. Something darker and more dangerous than either. The thorns pricked my palm, drawing small beads of blood, and I thought about unprotected girls and expensive handkerchiefs, and the way his eyes had studied me like I was something precious that had been lost, and only now, finally, been found. I thought about danger and dark suits, and the feeling of his warm fingers wrapped around my wrist. And God help me, I wanted to feel them there again. I didn't sleep that night. How could I, with that rose sitting on my nightstand like a beautiful threat, its petals catching the orange glow from the streetlight outside my window? I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to my neighbor's television bleeding through the thin walls and the occasional wail of sirens in the distance. Every sound made me flinch. Every creak of the old building settling made my heart leap into my throat. I'd checked the locks 3 times, the deadbolt, the chain, even the window that overlooked the fire escape. But I still felt exposed, vulnerable, like I was being watched through walls I couldn't see. At some point near dawn, I must have dozed off, because I woke to my phone alarm screaming at me that it was already 9 a.m. I had class at 10, Introduction to Business Management at the community college, one of the 2 courses I could afford this semester while working nights at the hospital. I dragged myself out of bed, my body aching with exhaustion, and stumbled to the bathroom. The mirror reflected what I expected. Dark circles under my eyes, skin pale and sallow, hair a tangled mess. I looked exactly like what I was, a 23-year-old woman working herself to the bone just to stay afloat in a city that would swallow her whole without a second thought. The rose caught my eye as I pulled on jeans and a faded sweater. In the harsh morning light, it looked even more out of place in my shabby apartment. Too perfect, too expensive, too everything. I should throw it away, burn the note, delete that phone number from my memory, and pretend last night never happened. My fingers brushed against the business card in my wallet as I grabbed it. I left the card where it was. The bus ride to campus was the same as always, packed with people who looked through me rather than at me, all of us trapped in our own small survival bubbles. But today, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. I found myself scanning faces, looking for dark eyes and expensive suits. But there was nothing. Just tired workers and harried students and the everyday anonymity of city life. Professor Chen droned on about market analysis and competitive advantages, but I couldn't focus. My notes were a mess of half-finished sentences and unconscious doodles, thorns and roses and initials I didn't remember writing, DM over and over in the margins, like my hand was trying to solve a puzzle my brain refused to acknowledge. Ms. Thorne, perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on vertical integration. I looked up to find the entire class staring at me, Professor Chen's eyebrows raised in expectation. Heat flooded my face. I'm sorry, I didn't... My phone buzzed in my pocket, once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Phones off in class, Ms. Thorne. You know the rules. Professor Chen's voice was sharp with disapproval. See me after class. The lecture crawled by with agonizing slowness. When it finally ended and the other students filed out, I approached the professor's desk with dread pooling in my stomach. I couldn't afford to fail this class, couldn't afford to lose the fragile academic standing that was my only hope of eventually getting a better job, a better life. Emma? Professor Chen's voice softened slightly as she removed her glasses. Is everything all right? This isn't like you. You're usually one of my best students. I'm fine. Just didn't sleep well. It won't happen again. She studied me with the same kind of intensity that man DM had used last night, but hers was maternal concern rather than predatory interest. You look exhausted. Are you working too many hours at that hospital job? I have to work. The bills don't pay themselves. I understand, but your education should be your priority. If you need resources, the college has programs. I'm fine, I repeated, perhaps more sharply than I intended. Really, thank you for your concern, Professor. Outside, I finally checked my phone. 3 messages from a number I didn't recognize, but somehow knew exactly who it was. Did you sleep well, Emma? You should eat breakfast. You look like you skipped too many meals. I'm having your door replaced today. The lock is a joke. Anyone could get in. My hands went numb. The phone nearly slipped from my grip. He was watching me. Right now, had to be. How else would he know I looked tired, that I'd skipped breakfast, that I was even awake? I spun around, scanning the campus quad with wild eyes. Students lounged on the grass, taking advantage of the unseasonably warm November day. A food truck dispensed coffee and bagels to a short line, nothing unusual. No one paying attention to me, but then I saw it. A black SUV parked across the street. Windows tinted so dark they reflected the morning sun like obsidian mirrors. It hadn't been there when I'd arrived. I was certain of it. My phone buzzed again. Don't look so frightened, Emma. I'm simply ensuring you're safe. This neighborhood has a crime rate 40% higher than the city average. Did you know that? I typed back with shaking fingers. Who are you? What do you want from me? The response came immediately. You'll know soon enough. Go to class. Learn something useful. And Emma, don't skip lunch. There's a sandwich shop 2 blocks north, Antonio's. Order the grilled chicken. It's fresh today. My treat. Before I could respond, another message arrived. A screenshot of a mobile payment confirmation. He'd just sent $200 to my Venmo account with the note, "For necessities." I should have sent it back, should have blocked the number and reported him for stalking. Instead, I stood there in the middle of campus, staring at that money like it was both salvation and damnation, because $200 meant I could actually buy groceries instead of living on ramen and cereal. It meant I could pay the electric bill that was already 2 weeks overdue. It meant breathing room in a life that had become one long, suffocating panic about survival, but it also meant I was accepting something from him, becoming entangled, taking the first step into a web I might never escape. My stomach growled, loud enough that a passing student glanced at me with amusement. I hadn't eaten since yesterday's lunch, a bag of chips from the hospital vending machine. I walked to Antonio's. The sandwich shop was small and surprisingly clean, wedged between a laundromat and a convenience store with barred windows. The owner, a round man with flour on his apron and a smile that crinkled his eyes, greeted me like I was an expected guest. "Ah, you must be Emma. Your order's already being prepared. Please, sit. I didn't call ahead. No need. Everything's been taken care of." He gestured to a small table by the window, already set with water and a cloth napkin. Cloth, in a neighborhood sandwich shop. I sat because my legs felt suddenly weak. Through the window, I could see the black SUV parked across the street, a silent sentinel. Watching. Always watching. The sandwich arrived within minutes. Grilled chicken with fresh mozzarella, roasted red peppers, and basil pesto on ciabatta that was still warm from the oven. It smelled like heaven. My mouth watered despite the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Eat, Antonio urged, setting down a small cup of tomato bisque. You're too skinny. A strong wind would blow you away. The first bite was transcendent. I hadn't realized how hungry I was, how long it had been since I'd eaten something that wasn't prepackaged or reheated. I devoured half the sandwich before I could even think about what I was doing, accepting his charity, letting myself be taken care of by a man who'd broken into my apartment and was currently having me surveilled. My phone buzzed. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help myself. Better. But eat the soup, too. You need the calories. I set down the sandwich, my appetite suddenly gone. He's watching me right now, I said to the empty shop. Antonio had disappeared into the back. Always. Get used to it. Why? I typed furiously. Why me? I'm nobody. I have nothing you could possibly want. The response took longer this time. Long enough that I'd almost given up on getting one. Long enough that I'd started eating the soup, which was, infuriatingly, the best tomato bisque I'd ever tasted. You have everything I want, Emma. You just don't know it yet. Finish your lunch. A car will pick you up after your evening class. Don't argue. Don't refuse. Just get in. And if I don't, then I'll come get you myself, and I won't be nearly as patient as I'm being now. There was no threat in the words, just a simple statement of fact. Somehow, that made it more terrifying than any explicit menace could have been. I finished my lunch in silence, tasting nothing. When I tried to pay, Antonio waved me off with a knowing smile that made my skin crawl. Already settled, Bella. Come back anytime. You're always welcome here. Outside, the SUV pulled away from the curb as soon as I emerged, gliding into traffic with practiced ease. But I knew it, or another just like it, would be back, following me to my next class, watching as I went through the motions of my ordinary, invisible life that was suddenly anything but. My afternoon class was a blur. I sat in the back of the lecture hall, hyper-aware of every person who entered, every shadow that moved past the frosted glass door, but no one paid me any attention. I was still invisible to everyone except him. At 6 p.m., I stood outside the humanities building, my backpack slung over one shoulder, watching the stream of students heading home or to the library or to their part-time jobs. I could just walk away, go to the bus stop like normal, clock in for my shift at the hospital, and pretend this was all some bizarre hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress. The black SUV pulled up to the curb in front of me with barely a whisper of sound. The back door opened. I should run, should scream, should do literally anything except what I was about to do. I got in. The interior was all black leather and polished wood, smelling of that same expensive cologne and something else, gun oil maybe, or the peculiar scent of money and power. The door closed behind me with a solid thunk that sounded like a cell door slamming shut. He sat across from me, one leg crossed over the other, perfectly relaxed in a charcoal suit that was somehow different from last night's, but equally devastating. Those dark eyes tracked my every movement as I settled into the seat, my backpack clutched on my lap like a shield. Emma. My name was a purr in his throat, satisfied and possessive. I'm glad you made the smart choice. I don't even know your name, I whispered. His smile was slow, predatory. Dante. Dante Moretti. He extended his hand across the space between us, the same hand that had held my wrist last night, that had pressed the handkerchief to my cut. A pleasure to officially meet you. I stared at his hand like it was a venomous snake. Taking it would mean something, would seal some unspoken contract I didn't fully understand. I took it anyway. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and I felt that same electric jolt I'd experienced in the hospital cafeteria. He didn't shake my hand so much as hold it, his thumb brushing across my knuckles in a gesture that was far too intimate for a first introduction. You're trembling, he observed, his voice low enough that only I could hear it over the purr of the engine as we pulled into traffic. Are you frightened of me, Emma? Yes, I admitted, because lying seemed pointless when he could apparently read my every thought and feeling. Good. Fear keeps people alive. He released my hand slowly, reluctantly. But you should know, I would never hurt you. Quite the opposite, actually. Then what do you want? To keep you safe. To give you everything you need. To ensure that you never have to worry about paying bills or eating meals or working yourself to death in that miserable hospital cafeteria ever again. Why? The word came out as barely more than a whisper. Dante leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, closing the distance between us until I could see flecks of amber in those dark eyes. Because 3 months ago, someone stole from me, someone close, someone I trusted. And that someone got your best friend pregnant before he disappeared with $2 million of my money. The world tilted sideways. My best friend. He could only mean Jake, I breathed. Jake Morrison. Yes. Dante's voice had gone cold, all the false warmth evaporating like morning mist. And you, Emma Thorne, are going to help me find him. I don't know where Jake is. The words tumbled out in a rush, panic rising in my chest like floodwater. I haven't seen him in months. Not since he and Sarah Bennett, your roommate from freshman year, currently 7 months pregnant with Morrison's child, and living in a women's shelter in Queens because he abandoned her without a cent. Dante's voice was clinical, detached, like he was reciting a grocery list rather than destroying what little remained of my faith in people. I know. I've had people watching her too. The SUV glided through traffic with supernatural smoothness, the city lights beginning to flicker on as dusk settled over the streets. I watched them blur past, my mind struggling to process what he was telling me. Jake and Sarah, a baby. Jake stealing $2 million. None of it made sense. Jake worked in IT, I said stupidly. He fixed computers. He worked in IT for one of my subsidiary companies, had access to certain financial systems, got greedy. Dante pulled out his phone, swiped through it with practiced efficiency, then turned the screen toward me. Recognize this? The photo showed Jake at what looked like a private poker game, cards in hand, chips stacked in front of him, but it was the expression on his face that made my stomach turn, the wild gleam in his eyes, the manic grin. This wasn't the sweet, goofy guy who'd tutored me in statistics and brought Sarah flowers every Friday. This was someone else entirely, someone desperate and dangerous. He had a gambling problem, Dante continued, pocketing his phone. Started small, sports betting, online casinos. Then he found the high-stakes games, lost more than he could ever hope to repay. So he made a choice, steal from me or let the people he owed money to kill him. He chose poorly. And Sarah? My voice cracked on her name. What does she have to do with any of this? Nothing. She's an innocent victim, like you. His eyes softened fractionally, which is why I'm going to take care of both of you. I'm not a victim. I'm not anything. I barely even talk to Jake anymore. We were friends in college, but after he and Sarah got together, we just drifted. I can't help you find him. You're wrong. Dante reached across the space between us, his fingers catching my chin and tilting my face up to meet his gaze. The touch was gentle, but utterly unyielding, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. Jake trusts you. If he's going to contact anyone, it'll be you or Sarah. And since Sarah's phone is tapped and she's under 24-hour surveillance, that leaves you. He won't contact me. Why would he? Because 3 days ago, your mother's medical bills were suddenly paid in full. Every last cent. The hospital called you yesterday to inform you, but you haven't checked your voicemail yet. His thumb brushed along my jawline, a possessive gesture that made heat pool low in my belly despite my fear. That was Jake. Guilt money. Which means he's been watching you. Which means he'll reach out soon. I jerked back from his touch, my mind reeling. My mother's bills. The tens of thousands of dollars in debt from her cancer treatment. The collections notices that had been piling up since she died 6 months ago. The constant phone calls from agencies demanding money I didn't have. Gone? How do you know that? How do you know any of this? Because I know everything about you, Emma. His voice dropped to barely more than a whisper, intimate and terrifying. I know you take the 47 bus to work because you sold your car to pay for your mother's funeral. I know you're lactose intolerant, but you still eat ice cream when you're sad because it was your mother's favorite. I know you have a scar on your left knee from falling off your bike when you were 9. I know you cry in the shower so your neighbors won't hear. I know you're drowning, and I'm offering you a lifeline. Tears burned behind my eyes. What kind of lifeline comes with surveillance and threats? The kind that keeps you alive. The SUV slowed, and I realized we were pulling into an underground parking garage, not the hospital, not my apartment. Somewhere else entirely. Jake stole from me, Emma. That means certain people in my organization want him dead, want everyone connected to him dead. The only reason you and Sarah are still breathing is because I've claimed you both as mine. As my responsibility, my property. Property? The word came out sharp, angry. I'm not a thing you can own. In my world, you are exactly that. The vehicle stopped, the engine cutting off, plunging us into sudden silence broken only by the sound of my ragged breathing. But I'm a generous owner. You'll have everything you need. Protection, money, a life without fear or struggle. All you have to do is stay close and tell me the moment Jake makes contact. And if I refuse? Dante's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between us. something cold and merciless that reminded me exactly what he was. Not a savior, not a benefactor. A mafia boss who'd built his empire on violence and fear. Then I remove my protection, and there are at least 5 people in my organization who would happily remedy that situation within the hour. Your body would wash up in the East River by morning, and no one would even notice you were gone. He leaned in close enough that I could feel his breath against my cheek. Is that what you want, Emma, to disappear? To become just another statistic in a city that's already forgotten you exist? No, I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded, hating the tears that finally spilled down my cheeks, hating him for being right, that I was invisible, forgettable, alone in a world that wouldn't mourn my passing. Then stay close. His fingers caught one of my tears, wiping it away with surprising gentleness. Let me take care of you. Let me give you the life you deserve. All you have to do is trust me. I don't even know you. You will. He opened his door and stepped out, then turned back to offer me his hand. Come. There's someone I want you to meet. I stared at that extended hand. Perfectly manicured, strong, connected to a man who could order my death as easily as he'd ordered my lunch. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But where would I go? Back to my crumbling apartment with its inadequate locks. Back to the hospital where I was nothing more than invisible hands washing dishes. Back to a life of slow suffocation and grinding poverty. I took his hand. He pulled me from the SUV with easy strength, steadying me when I stumbled on legs that felt like water. We were in a private garage, immaculately clean, housing a collection of vehicles that probably cost more than my entire neighborhood. 2 of the men from last night, Marcus and another whose name I didn't know, flanked us immediately, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Dante kept my hand in his as he led me to an elevator, his grip firm, but not painful. Possessive. Like I was something precious he'd finally acquired and had no intention of letting go. Where are we? I managed to ask as the elevator doors slid shut, enclosing us in a small space that smelled like leather and his cologne. My home. Well, one of them. I have several. He pressed the button for the penthouse, and the elevator began its smooth ascent. You'll be staying here from now on. What? No. I have an apartment. I have a job. I have nothing. His voice was flat, final. You have nothing, Emma. No family, no real friends, no prospects. Just debt and exhaustion and a slow march toward an early grave. His free hand came up to cup my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. I'm giving you a chance to live instead of merely survive. Take it. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse that stole what little breath I had left. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city sprawl, modern furniture in shades of cream and charcoal. Art on the walls that I recognized from my one elective art history class. Originals, not prints, worth more money than I could comprehend. And standing in the middle of it all, looking small and lost and heavily pregnant, was Sarah. Emma! She rushed toward me, or rather waddled as fast as her condition would allow, tears streaming down her face. Oh my God, Emma, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what Jake was doing. I caught her in my arms, and we clung to each other like drowning women finding driftwood in a storm. She smelled like the lavender lotion she'd always favored, and feeling her familiar warmth made something inside me crack open. It's okay, I whispered, even though nothing was okay. It's okay. We're okay. Ladies. Dante's voice cut through our reunion, polite but commanding attention. Sarah, why don't you show Emma to her room? I'm sure she'd like to freshen up before dinner. Sarah pulled back, wiping at her eyes, and I saw the changes in her, the roundness of her belly, yes, but also the shadows under her eyes that matched my own, the hollowness in her cheeks that spoke of too much stress and not enough food. But there was something else, too, expensive maternity clothes, a glow to her skin that came from proper vitamins and health care. A diamond bracelet on her wrist that caught the light. Gifts or shackles. Maybe both. Come on, she said softly, taking my hand. Your room's next to mine. I let her lead me down a hallway lined with more expensive art, my mind still struggling to process everything. My room turned out to be larger than my entire studio apartment, with a king-sized bed dressed in silk sheets, a private bathroom with a soaking tub, and a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in exactly my size. "He had them brought in this afternoon," Sarah explained, seeing my expression. "He's very thorough." "Sarah, what the hell is going on? How long have you been here?" 2 weeks. She sank onto the bed with a grateful sigh, one hand rubbing her swollen belly. "After Jake disappeared, I couldn't pay rent. Got evicted. Ended up at the shelter. Then Dante showed up one day with doctors and lawyers and told me I had 2 choices: accept his protection or take my chances on the street." Her eyes met mine, frightened and resigned. "I chose to live. For the baby." "Does he hurt you?" "No. God, no. He barely even speaks to me except to ask if I need anything. The doctor comes twice a week to check on the baby. I have everything I could want except freedom." She laughed, but it was a brittle sound. "I'm a bird in a gilded cage, Emma. And now you are too." I walked to the window, pressing my palms against the cold glass, staring down at the city far below. From up here, the streets where I'd struggled and suffered looked like a toy model, unreal and distant. I could see the hospital where I'd worked, the campus where I'd attended classes, the bus routes I'd memorized, my entire small life mapped out beneath me, already feeling like it belonged to someone else. "He's going to use us to get to Jake," I said quietly. "I know. But Emma..." Sarah's voice was small, frightened. "I don't think Jake's coming back. I think he's going to let us pay for what he did. And I think Dante knows it." Before I could respond, there was a knock on the door. Marcus stepped inside without waiting for permission, his expression professionally blank. "Mr. Moretti requests your presence for dinner in 15 minutes. Both of you." His eyes flicked to me. "He suggests you change into something more comfortable, Miss Thorne. You'll find appropriate attire in the closet." He left before I could argue. Sarah heaved herself up from the bed with a grimace. "Don't fight him on the little things," she advised. "Save your battles for what matters." After she left, I stood alone in this beautiful prison, staring at the closet full of expensive clothes I hadn't chosen and didn't want. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, pale, exhausted, trapped. I thought about running, about calling the police, about refusing to play whatever game Dante was orchestrating, but then I thought about my mother's paid-off medical bills, about Sarah and her unborn baby, about Dante's casual mention of bodies in the East River and how easily I could disappear. And I thought about the way his fingers had felt against my skin, the heat in his eyes when he looked at me, the possessiveness in his voice when he'd called me his property. I should have been more frightened, should have been planning escape routes and exit strategies. Instead, I found myself wondering what it would feel like to surrender, to stop fighting and struggling and just let him catch me. I changed into a simple black dress from the closet. Designer, perfectly fitted, probably worth more than a month of my wages. When I looked in the mirror again, I saw someone different, someone who might belong in a penthouse overlooking the city, someone who might be worth protecting, someone who might already be falling into a trap she'd never escape. And the most terrifying part, I wasn't sure I wanted to. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 20 but held only 3. Dante at the head of the table, Sarah and me on either side. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over china so delicate I was afraid to touch it, and the food kept coming in courses I couldn't name, prepared by a chef I never saw. Dante watched me throughout the meal with those dark, unreadable eyes, tracking every bite I took, every nervous gesture, every glance I exchanged with Sarah. He barely touched his own food, seemingly more interested in observing us, observing me, than in eating. "You need to eat more," he said, when I set down my fork after finishing only half of the main course, some kind of fish in a butter sauce that melted on my tongue. "You're underweight." "I'm fine." "You're malnourished. I've seen your medical records. When was the last time you had a physical? Had your blood work done? Actually took care of yourself instead of just surviving day to day?" The invasion of privacy should have angered me. Instead, I felt a strange flutter in my chest, something disturbingly close to being cared for. No one had worried about my health in months, not since my mother died. "I can't afford doctors," I said quietly. "You can now. I've arranged for a full physical tomorrow morning. Dr. Chen will come here. I have class tomorrow. Not anymore. He said it so casually, like he was commenting on the weather rather than dismantling my life piece by piece. I've withdrawn you from the semester. You'll re-enroll in the spring at a better school, Columbia, perhaps, or NYU. Whichever you prefer. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor, the sound harsh in the elegant room. You had no right. That's my education, my future. You can't just... I can do whatever I want. He didn't raise his voice, didn't move from his relaxed position, but the air in the room changed, became heavier, dangerous. You're under my protection now, Emma. That means you do what I say when I say it. For your own good. My own good? You're kidnapping me. I'm keeping you alive. He stood then, moving around the table with that predatory grace, and I found myself backing up until I hit the wall. He didn't stop until he was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell that intoxicating cologne mixed with something darker. Whiskey, maybe. Or the smoke from whatever deals he'd made today. Do you know what happened to the last person who betrayed me, Emma? Do you want me to tell you the details? No, I whispered. Good. Because those details would give you nightmares. His hand came up to rest against the wall beside my head, caging me in. Jake Morrison is a dead man walking. The only question is how many people he takes down with him. I'm offering you and Sarah a chance to survive his stupidity. All you have to do is let me keep you safe. By controlling everything I do, by making me a prisoner, by making you mine. His other hand caught my chin, tilting my face up. And yes, that means control. It means supervision. It means I know where you are and who you're with every second of every day. Because the people looking for Jake don't care about collateral damage. They'll torture you for information you don't have, then kill you just to send him a message. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to make you understand reality. His thumb brushed across my lower lip, and I hated the way my breath hitched at the contact. You're in my world now, Emma, and in my world, pretty, vulnerable girls don't survive on their own. They need protection. They need someone strong enough to keep the wolves at bay. And that's you? My protector? Yes. The word was barely more than a whisper, but it resonated through me like a physical touch. I saw you in that hospital cafeteria, exhausted and invisible and so fucking beautiful it hurt to look at you. Saw the way you moved through the world like you were apologizing for taking up space. And I knew you were mine before I even learned your name. That's insane. Perhaps. His lips curved into a smile that was more predatory than amused. But it's also true. I've built an empire on instinct, Emma, on knowing what I want and taking it, and I want you. Why? The question came out as barely more than a breath. I'm nobody. I have nothing. I'm not... You're everything. His hand moved from the wall to tangle in my hair, fingers tightening just enough to make my scalp tingle. You're uncorrupted by this world. Untouched by the dirt and violence that coats everything in my life. You're good, Emma. Pure. And I'm going to keep you that way even if it means locking you in a tower and throwing away the key. I don't want to be locked away. Then don't fight me. Accept what I'm offering. Let me take care of you. His face moved closer, close enough that his lips were almost brushing mine. Let me give you everything you've been denied. Everything you deserve. I should have pushed him away. Should have screamed for help. Though who would come? Who would save me from a man who owned everything and everyone around him? Instead, I stood frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs, my body betraying me by leaning into his warmth instead of away from it. Emma. Sarah's voice cut through the tension like a knife. She stood in the doorway, one hand on her belly, her expression pleading. Don't fight him. Please. It's not worth it. Dante pulled back slowly, releasing me, but not before his fingers trailed down my neck in a gesture of obvious possession. Sarah understands. She's learned to accept reality. You will too. He walked past her without another word, leaving me slumped against the wall, my legs shaking and my mind in chaos. Sarah crossed to me immediately, grabbing my hands. He's not going to hurt you, she said urgently. But you can't defy him directly. It only makes things worse. How can you accept this? How can you just give in? Because I have a baby to think about. Her voice cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. Because I have no money, no family, no options. Because Dante Moretti might be a monster, but he's a monster who's keeping us fed and safe and alive. Do you understand? Alive, Emma, which is more than Jake ever cared about. I pulled her into my arms, and we stood there in that beautiful dining room, two women trapped in a gilded cage, holding each other because there was no one else. That night, I lay in my enormous bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the penthouse. Sarah had gone to sleep hours ago, exhausted by the baby and the stress. But I couldn't quiet my mind. My phone, my old cracked phone that I'd somehow been allowed to keep, sat on the nightstand, dark and silent. No messages from Jake, no calls, nothing. Around 2 a.m. I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, a pause outside my door. The handle turned slowly and my heart leapt into my throat. The door opened just enough for a shadow to slip through. Tall, broad-shouldered, unmistakable. "What are you doing?" I whispered, sitting up and clutching the silk sheets to my chest like they could protect me. "Making sure you're still here." Dante's voice came from the darkness near the door. "That you haven't done anything stupid like trying to escape." "How would I escape? We're 30 floors up, and I'm sure every exit is guarded." "Smart girl," I heard rather than saw his smile. "But people do stupid things when they're desperate. I needed to see for myself. You could have checked the cameras. I'm sure you have them everywhere." "I do. But I wanted to see you in person. Wanted to..." He trailed off, and I heard him move closer, his footsteps soft on the plush carpet. "Wanted to make sure you were real, that I hadn't imagined you." The vulnerability in his voice surprised me. This wasn't the cold Mafia boss who'd threatened me over dinner. This was something else. Something raw and almost frightened beneath the armor of control. "I'm real," I said softly. "Yes." He sat on the edge of my bed, and in the faint light from the window, I could see his profile, the strong jaw, the sharp cheekbones, the way his shoulders carried invisible weight. "My mother used to say that some people are meant to save us, that angels wear unexpected faces. I'm not an angel, no. But you're mine to protect, mine to keep safe." His hand found mine in the darkness, fingers intertwining with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. "I know you're frightened. I know this isn't what you wanted, but I promise you, Emma, I will never let anyone hurt you. Not Jake's enemies, not random violence on the street, not even yourself." "What if you're the one hurting me?" He was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "Then I'll be the monster you need me to be, because keeping you alive matters more than keeping you happy. That's not love. That's obsession. I never said I loved you." His voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. "I said you were mine. There's a difference." He stood then, releasing my hand with obvious reluctance. "Sleep, Emma. Tomorrow you start your new life. Dr. Chen will examine you in the morning. Then you'll meet with the tutors I've arranged. You're not abandoning your education, just adjusting it to a safer format. In the afternoon, you'll accompany Sarah to her prenatal appointment. You're going to be her birth partner when the time comes. You've planned everything. I always do." He moved toward the door, then paused. "And Emma, don't try to contact anyone from your old life. Your phone is monitored. Your emails are being read. If Jake reaches out, you tell me immediately. That's not a request." After he left, I lay in the darkness for hours, my hand still tingling where he'd held it. Outside the window, the city glittered like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold and indifferent to the small tragedies playing out in its towers. I thought about escape, about authorities, about fighting back. But I also thought about Sarah and her baby, about Dante's casual mention of bodies in the river, about the warmth of his hand and the hunger in his eyes, and the terrifying possibility that some part of me, some damaged, desperate part, wanted to be claimed by someone who saw me, really saw me, even if that someone was a monster. 3 days passed in strange domesticity. Dr. Chen confirmed I was malnourished and anemic, prescribed vitamins I actually had access to, and scheduled follow-up appointments I would actually attend. The tutors were patient and knowledgeable, teaching me more in a few hours than I'd learned in weeks of distracted college classes. Sarah and I fell into an easy rhythm, cooking together in the massive kitchen, watching movies on the huge television, pretending we were just two friends having a sleepover, rather than two prisoners in a gilded cage. Dante was everywhere and nowhere. I'd catch glimpses of him on calls in his office, his voice low and threatening in Italian. He'd appear at dinner, watching me eat with those intense eyes, making sure I finished every bite. Once I woke in the night to find him standing at my window, staring out at the city, and something about his stillness made my heart ache. On the fourth day, everything changed. I was in the kitchen making tea when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Emma, it's Jake. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I need to see you. Need to explain. Meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. The old coffee shop near campus. Come alone, please. I'm begging you." My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. This was it. The moment Dante had been waiting for. I should tell him immediately, should hand over the phone and let him handle it. But Jake was my friend, or had been. And maybe, just maybe, if I could talk to him, I could fix this, could convince him to return the money, to make things right, to save all of us from whatever nightmare was coming. I deleted the message and typed back, "I'll be there." The phone buzzed again almost immediately. "Thank you. And Emma, don't tell Dante. He'll kill me before I can explain, please." I looked up to find Dante standing in the kitchen doorway, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "Who was that?" he asked quietly. And in that moment, I made a choice that would change everything. "Nobody," I lied, "just spam." His eyes narrowed fractionally, and I knew. He didn't believe me, but he nodded slowly, like he was accepting my first real betrayal with something almost like satisfaction, like he'd been waiting to see if I would lie to him, like he wanted an excuse for what came next. "Good," he said, moving toward me with deliberate steps. "Because you know what happens to people who betray me, don't you, Emma?" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only watch as he backed me against the counter, his hands bracing on either side of me, his body close enough that I could feel every breath he took. "Don't you?" he repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Yes," I managed, "and you would never do that, would you?" "No." "Liar." The word was almost affectionate. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing across my cheekbone. "You're a terrible liar, Emma. Your pulse races. Your pupils dilate. You can't quite meet my eyes. It's actually endearing. I don't—" "Jake texted you, asked you to meet him, and you said yes." He said it with absolute certainty, and my stomach dropped. "Did you really think I wouldn't know, that I wouldn't have alerts on every communication device in this penthouse?" Tears burned behind my eyes. I just wanted to talk to him, to fix this. There's nothing to fix. He made his choice. Now you've made yours. He leaned in until his lips were against my ear. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m., you'll go to that coffee shop. You'll meet Jake, and you'll wear this." Something cold touched my throat. A necklace settling against my skin, delicate chain, small pendant. I looked down to see a tiny diamond glittering between my collarbones. "It's beautiful," I whispered stupidly. "It's a tracker, and a listening device, and a panic button." His fingers fastened the clasp at my nape with practiced ease. "You'll go to Jake. You'll listen to whatever pathetic excuses he has, and you'll stay close to him, because I'll be listening. I'll be watching. And the moment, the very second, he threatens you or tries to take you away, I'll put a bullet between his eyes. No. Dante, please. He's a dead man, Emma. Has been since the moment he stole from me. The only question is whether you survive his stupidity." His hands gripped my shoulders, hard enough to bruise. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to be my bait, my beautiful, innocent bait. And when Jake reveals where he's been hiding, who he's been working with, what his plan is, I'm going to end him. Understand?" I nodded, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. "Good girl." He kissed my forehead. A a gesture so tender it made my heart crack. "Don't worry. I'll keep you safe. That's what I do. I keep what's mine." He left me there, shaking and crying, the necklace heavy around my throat like a collar, like a leash, like a promise that I would never, ever be free. The coffee shop looked exactly as I remembered. Faded brick exterior, mismatched furniture visible through steamed windows, the perpetual smell of burnt espresso and old books. I'd spent countless hours here during my freshman year, studying with Sarah and Jake, believing the world was full of possibilities instead of traps. That girl felt like someone else entirely. I sat at a corner table, my hands wrapped around a latte I couldn't taste, the necklace heavy against my collarbone. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but where would I go? Dante's men were everywhere. I'd spotted at least 3 on my walk from the SUV that had dropped me off 2 blocks away. The driver, Marcus, had given me explicit instructions. Stay visible, keep the necklace on, don't leave with Jake under any circumstances. As if I needed the reminder. As if I could forget the way Dante had looked at me this morning before I left. His dark eyes burning with something between possession and worry. His fingers lingering on my face like he was memorizing every detail in case it was the last time he saw me. "Stay close," he'd murmured against my temple, "and come back to me." Not a request, a command. But his voice had held something raw beneath the authority, something that sounded dangerously close to fear. The bell above the door chimed, and Jake walked in. I barely recognized him. The confident, easygoing guy I'd known had been replaced by someone gaunt and hollow-eyed, his clothes hanging loose on a frame that had lost too much weight too fast. He scanned the room with jerky, paranoid movements before his eyes found mine. The relief that flooded his face made my chest ache. "Emma." He slid into the seat across from me, reaching for my hands. I pulled them back, and hurt flickered across his features. I know you hate me. You should. But I needed to see you. Needed to explain. Explain what? How you stole $2 million from the Mafia? How you got Sarah pregnant and then abandoned her? How you've put everyone you supposedly cared about in danger. My voice was low but sharp, cutting through the ambient noise of the coffee shop. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was going to pay it back, I swear. The gambling. I thought I could win it back. Thought I could fix everything before anyone noticed. But it all went wrong so fast. He ran shaking hands through his hair, and I saw the tremor in his fingers, the wild edge to his eyes. "They're going to kill me, Emma. Moretti's people. They've already killed 2 guys I worked with. I'm next. Then give the money back. Turn yourself in. Let Dante..." "Dante?" Jake's eyes sharpened with sudden focus. "You're calling him Dante? Jesus Christ, Emma, what has he done to you?" I touched the necklace reflexively, and Jake's gaze followed the movement. His face went pale. "You're wearing his jewelry. He leaned back, something like horror dawning in his expression. "He's claimed you, hasn't he? Made you his." "Oh God, Emma, I'm so sorry. I never meant..." "What did you mean then? What was your plan, Jake?" "I was going to disappear. Change my name. Start over somewhere Moretti couldn't find me. But I couldn't leave without seeing you one more time. Without making sure you were okay." His hand shot across the table, grabbing mine before I could pull away. "Come with me. Right now. I have a car 2 blocks from here. We can be across the state line in 3 hours. Mexico by tomorrow. He can't chase us forever. And Sarah? Your baby?" Guilt flashed across his face, quickly buried. Sarah made her choice. She's safer with Moretti's protection than she would be on the run with me. "You're a coward." The words came out flat, factual. "You're willing to let her raise your child alone while you run away from your mistakes." "I'm willing to survive. That's more than most people who cross Dante Moretti can say." His grip tightened painfully on my hand. "Please, Emma. I'm begging you. Come with me. I can't lose you too. You're the only good thing I have left." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth beneath the desperate words. He didn't love me. He'd never loved me. I was just another escape route, another tool to ease his conscience, Another thing he could take because he'd already lost everything else. "No," I said quietly. "Emma." I said, "No, Jake." I pulled my hand free, standing up. "You made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." "He'll kill me." Jake's voice rose, drawing looks from other patrons. "Is that what you want? My blood on your hands?" My hands are already dirty. I picked up my purse, my legs surprisingly steady considering how my heart was racing. "Goodbye, Jake." I made it 3 steps before his hand locked around my wrist, yanking me back hard enough that I stumbled. His face was twisted with panic and rage, all pretense of the friend I'd known completely gone. "You're not leaving. You're going to help me whether you want to or not. Moretti wants you alive, which makes you valuable, makes you leverage." He started dragging me toward the back exit, his grip bruising. "You're coming with me, and you're going to help me negotiate." The cafe door exploded inward. Later, I would try to piece together exactly what happened in those next 30 seconds. But in the moment, it was just chaos and violence and the sound of my own screaming. Dante moved through the space like death incarnalized, fluid, purposeful, unstoppable. 2 of his men flanked him, weapons drawn, but he didn't need them. His fist connected with Jake's face with a crack that made my stomach turn. Jake released me, stumbling backward, blood pouring from his nose. "Don't," I started. But Dante was already there, hauling Jake up by his collar and slamming him against the wall, hard enough to rattle the framed photos hanging there. "You touched her." Dante's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried enough venom to kill. "You hurt her." I can see the bruises forming on her wrist from here. I didn't mean." "Shut up." Dante's hand moved to Jake's throat, applying pressure. Jake's face started turning purple. "You stole from me. You endangered innocent people. And now you've put your hands on something that belongs to me. Give me one reason I shouldn't snap your neck right here. Dante, please." I found my voice, moving closer despite the carnage, despite the very real possibility that I was about to watch a man die. "Please don't. Not here. Not like this." His eyes flicked to me, and what I saw there made my breath catch. Fury, yes, but also fear. Real, visceral fear that something had happened to me, that I'd been hurt, that he'd been too late. "He bruised you," Dante said, his voice rough with barely controlled rage. "He put his hands on you with intent to harm, to take you from me. But he didn't. I'm fine. I'm here. I'm safe." I stepped closer, close enough to touch his arm. "Please. Let the law handle him. Let him face real consequences, not just this." For a long moment, Dante didn't move, didn't breathe. Then, with visible effort, he released Jake, who collapsed to the floor, gasping and choking. "Marcus," Dante said without looking away from me, "call our contacts in the FBI. Mr. Morrison is ready to surrender himself for embezzlement and theft. I'm sure they'll be very interested in his cooperation regarding certain other criminal enterprises in exchange for protective custody." "You can't," Jake wheezed, but Marcus was already hauling him to his feet. "I just did." Dante's attention was entirely on me now, his hands coming up to cup my face with a gentleness that contradicted the violence of seconds before. "Did he hurt you? Tell me the truth." "My wrist." I showed him the forming bruises, and his jaw clenched so hard I could hear his teeth grind. I should kill him for this. "But you won't. Because I'm asking you not to." I covered his hands with mine, feeling them tremble slightly, the only sign that he wasn't as controlled as he appeared. "Because I'm safe. Because you kept your promise." Something shifted in his expression, the hard edges softening, the predator receding to reveal something almost vulnerable beneath. "You came back to me. You could have run, could have left with him, but you came back. I never planned to leave. The truth of it surprised me. I was angry that you used me as bait, angry that you manipulated the situation, but I never wanted to leave. Why?" The question was barely audible, like he was afraid of the answer. "Because..." I struggled to find the words for feelings I didn't fully understand myself. Because you see me. Really see me. Not as invisible Emma who washes dishes and fades into the background, but as someone worth protecting, worth keeping, worth claiming. You are worth all of that and more. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, wiping away tears I hadn't realized were falling. You're worth burning the world down for. That's terrifying. I know, but it's also true. He leaned his forehead against mine, and I could feel him breathing, could feel the rapid beat of his heart against my chest. I'm not a good man, Emma. I've done things that would make you sick, hurt people, killed people, built an empire on blood and fear. But with you, God, with you, I want to be different, want to be the man you see when you look at me. I see a monster, I whispered. I know. But I also see someone who paid my mother's medical bills, who's taking care of Sarah and her baby, who holds my hand in the dark and checks on me while I sleep to make sure I'm real. More tears fell, hot and fast. I see someone who's obsessed with me in a way that should terrify me, but instead makes me feel more alive than I have in years. His hands tightened on my face. Emma, I'm not saying I love you. I don't even know if I like you most of the time. But I'm saying I choose this. Choose you. Choose staying close instead of running away. I met his eyes, dark and intense, and entirely focused on me. Because maybe I need to be claimed just as much as you need to claim me. The kiss was inevitable. His lips crashed against mine with desperate hunger, one hand tangling in my hair while the other wrapped around my waist, pulling me flush against him. I could taste coffee and mint and something darker. Possession, maybe, or surrender. I kissed him back with equal fervor, my hands fisting in his shirt, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid and uncertain. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, I was distantly aware that we were still in the coffee shop, that people were staring, that Marcus was efficiently removing Jake while police sirens wailed in the distance. But none of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the way Dante was looking at me, like I was oxygen, and he'd been drowning, like I was salvation for a man who'd long since given up on redemption. Take me home, I said quietly. Home? Your penthouse. Our penthouse. I tested the words, found them fitting better than they should. Take me home, Dante. The smile that crossed his face was pure, unguarded joy. Brief and brilliant as lightning before his usual controlled mask slipped back into place. But I'd seen it. Seen the real man beneath the monster. And I wasn't afraid anymore. 3 months later, I stood in the penthouse nursery, watching Sarah rock her newborn daughter while late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows. Little Grace had her father's nose and her mother's eyes, and she was perfect despite the circumstances of her conception. Jake was in federal custody, cooperating with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'd never meet his daughter. Sarah had made that choice, and I supported it. Dante appeared in the doorway, silently as always, watching me watch them. His arms came around my waist from behind, pulling me back against his chest. You're good with her, he murmured against my hair. She's easy to love. Like her aunt. I turned in his arms, looping mine around his neck. In 3 months, so much had changed. I'd re-enrolled in school, Columbia, as he'd suggested, and was thriving with tutors who actually cared about my education. I'd gained weight, color returning to my cheeks, the constant exhaustion fading. I'd learned the contours of Dante's world, dangerous and violent and not remotely what I'd planned for my life, but I'd also learned the contours of his heart. The way he still checked on me at night, the way he remembered that I liked my coffee with too much cream, the way he'd commissioned a portrait of my mother so I'd never forget her face, the way he touched me like I was precious and kissed me like I was air. I have something for you, he said, pulling back slightly to retrieve a small box from his pocket. My heart stuttered. Dante, it's not what you think. Not yet. He opened it to reveal a key, old-fashioned, ornate, beautiful. This is the key to a gallery space downtown. I bought it this morning. It's yours. Mine? I don't understand. You mentioned once that you'd wanted to study art history. that you'd dreamed of opening a gallery someday before life got in the way. His fingers closed around mine, pressing the key into my palm. Now you can. Sarah can help manage it when Grace is older. You'll have your own business, your own purpose beyond being my beautiful bird in a gilded cage. Tears pricked my eyes, happy ones this time. You remembered that? I remember everything about you, Emma. Every dream you've mentioned, every casual wish, every small thing that makes you smile. He cupped my face, his expression intense. I know I've taken your freedom. I know I've controlled and manipulated and forced you into this life, but I'm trying. God, I'm trying to give you reasons to choose to stay beyond fear or obligation. I already have my reasons. I kissed him softly, tasting the surprise on his lips. You, Dante. You're my reason. Even though I'm a monster? Especially because you're a monster who's trying so hard to be a man for me. I smiled against his mouth. My monster. My protector. My obsession. Yours, he agreed. The word a vow and a surrender. Always yours. Sarah cleared her throat delicately. As beautiful as this is, Grace needs changing, and you two need to get a room. We broke apart, laughing, and I felt something settle in my chest. Contentment, maybe, or acceptance. This wasn't the life I'd planned. Wasn't the safe, normal future I'd once dreamed of, but it was mine. We were mine. Dante with his dark intensity and protective obsession. Sarah with her resilient strength and new beginning. Grace with her infinite potential. And I was theirs. Emma Thorne, who'd gone from invisible to essential, from drowning to dancing, from surviving to actually living. That evening, Dante and I sat on the penthouse balcony, watching the sun set over the city that had once seemed so indifferent to my existence. His arm was around my shoulders, my head on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Choosing this? Choosing me? Every day, I admitted, then smiled at his sharp intake of breath. And then you do something impossibly sweet, or surprisingly gentle. And I remember why I stayed, why I keep staying. I'll give you everything, Emma. Everything I have. Everything I am. It's all yours. I don't need everything. I tilted my head to look up at him, at the face I'd learned to read, to love in spite of its capacity for cruelty. I just need you to stay close, to keep watching over me, to keep claiming me like I'm something precious worth fighting for. Always. His lips found mine in a kiss that tasted like promises and possession, and the strange, twisted love we'd built from danger and desperation. You're mine, Emma, until the world ends and beyond. And you're mine, I whispered back. My beautiful monster, my impossible salvation. Below us, the city glittered with a million lives I'd never touch, a million stories I'd never know. But up here, in this tower of glass and steel, wrapped in the arms of a man who'd claimed me with the same ruthless determination he applied to everything else, I'd found something I'd never expected. I'd found home. Not in a place, but in a person. In the weight of his gaze, and the warmth of his touch, and the fierce, protective obsession that said I would never be invisible again. I would never be alone again. I would never be anything but his. And God help me. I wouldn't have it any other way. The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, and Dante pulled me closer, his hand finding mine, our fingers intertwining like they'd been designed to fit together. Stay close, he murmured, echoing the first command he'd ever given me. Always, I promised. And I meant it.